Hey minions, welcome to Crank It Up. I'm the Bandit.
And I'm the Punisher. And we would like to thank you for all your engagement and excitement that you've shown during the 2019 March Smashness tournament.
Yeah, it's been phenomenal. All the feedback we've gotten, positive, and some things that we'd like to improve. We love the number of people who were emotionally invested in this tournament.
Yes, it was absolutely phenomenal. In case you didn't catch it, I am the Punisher. I'm pretty sure I've destroyed a lot of brackets, but I don't think I've destroyed as many as you did as the Bandit with Kaiju Innsmouth.
I apologize for nothing, and I said I'm playing upsets. We said that from the very beginning.
We did say that. So it's I guess it's on you guys for figuring out that, you know, maybe the person who does a podcast every week about the game might be really good at it.
But the thing is, we have a phenomenal cast of players. I want to thank everyone who is involved with the game. We're not just a playtesting team. We're good friends, and they were phenomenal throughout the tournament. A lot of close games. Just want to thank them once again for all of their involvement.
Yes, absolutely. It was a lot of weekends, nights, evenings. It was just a lot of time. A lot of pie. Yes, there was pie. I know none of it was recorded, but trust me, there was pie.
And I just want to clarify that Eric specifically requested he did not want to have to be editing out pie and people chewing on pie, which is totally what I was planning on doing.
Yeah.
And so we can assure you that there was always pie.
And I'm sure you all appreciated not hearing all the cast smacking in your ear as they're eating pie.
Yes, because we got the mics that will pick it up.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this year's tournament. There's a couple of things that we want to just bring to focus, mostly because not everybody watched every video. There's a lot of things that were said earlier on in the tournament that may have gotten missed. So because this is a recap video, we want to give people one last chance to understand a couple of things that they may have missed. The first was that there was a very specific process by which the teams were selected even before they went to the seeding process. Some people may think that these are the greatest combinations out there. They're not. That was never the intention. The goal was pretty much twofold, and we were trying to get something that was statistically above average. The idea was, what is a combination that I'd be comfortable with playing in a tournament? And what is something that I actually think could be drafted in a tournament? You know, there are some combos that are thrown out there like superhero princesses being really powerful or zombie robots. Under no circumstance should those ever be drafted in a multi-person tournament, unless there's something like 6 or something like that. The idea is, if you've got 32 people playing and they're all drafting tournaments for the tournament, what combos should be created? And so that's why we weren't trying to keep the power level at its maximum. We were trying to keep it even, but statistically above average.
Right, so you're drafting a large game, so we'll pick aliens, next person probably pick like robots and maybe zombies, and so those would never be paired together.
Right, and the idea is that by the time it got back to them, it would be slimmer pickings and they'd pick something that would be good.
Right, so something that's not as strong but would still be complementary to their skills.
The actual way that we started for most of the combinations was we picked the top 16 and we picked the bottom 16 and we tried to pair them up as much as possible because that's what's most likely going to happen in a tournament, and then we kind of filled in the gaps from there. Right. So yes, even Innsmouth was in the bottom 16 just because of the fact, and I thought that they would pair really well with Kaiju, so I picked that one pretty early on. The next thing I want to talk about is the presence of Titans, because we keep getting asked that. Now, I've maintained from the very beginning that Titans would not be in the tournament, and there was a specific reason for that, and it was twofold. One, not everybody has access to them yet, and they haven't seen them, and so they couldn't necessarily evaluate. And two, and I want to stress this very clearly, I wanted a data point for the Titans myself, about their involvement, and the only way to do that was to do it before and to do it after. Because I have some long-running theories that now I'm pretty confident about, and there's a video that I've been sitting on for a while that I call the ACE system of classifying Titans. There are 3 types of Titans. They are the A for automatic power, C for conditional power, and E for exempt power. And Gorgonzola is an example of A, automatic power, where he gets power counters that are independent of anything else. In other words, I could leave the Titan on the base and just get power and scoring presence. Whereas like Megabot needs the other minions. Megabot himself doesn't guarantee presence. And then there are some Titans that never give power. I believe very strongly that automatic Titans are an advantage. And I was worried that there's no way, for the level of power that we're trying to give all the factions, there's no way to do that while including the Titans. I actually think the Titans went a bit too far. And so I wanted to see just how everyone would do focusing on synergy rather than the Titans. the goal of the Titans is to increase the types of synergies that you can have, not necessarily send a faction into overdrive, which a lot of them did. As much as I love Dagon, he actually does make the Innsmouth much stronger. Some people have said that, you know, they went from being F tier to S tier, and for those types of factions, we want to see just how well they could do with the right pairing instead of focusing on themselves, because Smash Up is about combining 2 ones, and that's why we focus on synergy rather than Titans. And there's a lot more that I'll say about that in coming videos, but there was an intentional choice, and I think that things would have been worse and a little bit more lopsided had the Titans been included. Because there are plenty of times when I could put a Titan out with 1 power and stay off the base entirely, and there is nothing that most factions can do about.
They could even destroy the 1 Titan that you put on there to put the power on the Titan.
Right.
And then nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, so it's guaranteed presence. So we stand by that, but we're going to talk about Titans a little bit later on in the video when we talk about 2020.
Now, a little bit of clarification. When Jim was talking about the Titans, he's only talking about the Titans from the Titan pack. We still include the Big in Japan Titans because they came included with the Titans. So just a little bit of clarification, a little bit of 2020.
Yeah.
But it was kind of obvious from that conversation. I hope you caught that.
Right. Well, actually, a couple of people had said that, you know, why were those Titans included? Well, you can't not include them from the faction. It's built into them.
Right. It's essential to their mechanic, because then some of them like play a Gagazora here, and it's like, well, that card's useless now.
And it's also it's also part of their balancing.
Right.
So thanks for that clarification. The next thing we want to talk about is the pattern by which the games were played. So we said early on that I was going to be playing only the underdogs, but there was also a pattern that made sense for 5 people, and that was that everybody played me the same number of times, which was to be expected, and everybody played each other the same number of times and in the same position. So, like, J.Crew played Simon Stern twice in the first round, and then they each were the favorite and they each were the underdog. And then for anyone who didn't play someone in round 1, they played them in round 2 in the reverse position. So for rounds 1 and 2, everybody played the same amount of times and everybody played the same role the same number of times. And that was for balancing reasons. When it got to be round 2, we tried to make everybody play who they either advanced with or who they played against. But because of the fact that we were trying to maintain the roles and make sure that not everybody is playing underdogs or favorites more than another person, they kind of shifted some things around. But it ended up working out pretty nicely, where most people either played someone that they played with or played against, so they had, you know, the extra familiarity when it counted, while still maintaining the balance that we were looking for. And I know that people had some comments about that, but there was a plan that was implemented in place.
Right, so it may have looked and appeared to be chaotic, but there was actually a system behind the madness.
Yeah, no pun intended.
I actually didn't mean that one. That was
really. I see the pun and the Punisher does not.
No, I saw the pun as soon as I was saying, I'm like, oh, yes.
He's wearing my shirt, so he must have lost all of the, this is my Lucky Bandit jacket, by the way. Thanks, Mom. Where are we going with this? Okay,
so we're moving on to
the seeding algorithm.
Seeding, yes.
Now, this is my bad, and this we were just going to chalk up to not really having done this before.
Yeah, inaugural March Smashness.
Right. So there were seven committee members, myself included, and they're all fantastic. I trust all of their opinions. And what's really interesting is how much we all disagreed on. And I think in Smash Up, it's possible to disagree on something
and still be right.
And still be right.
Absolutely be right about
something. And I'm going to talk about that a lot when we talk about the Final Four of the tournament. I think more than anything, how I computed the averages was wrong, because it doesn't take into account how strongly people feel one way or another. So if I say that something is really good and someone says that something is really bad, then it's going to appear to be average.
It should be more weighted towards those outliers.
Right. Yeah. And we should talk about, okay, well, why do you feel that way? And if the outliers are weighted sort of like a bell curve but inverted, because then someone pointed out that no one really liked Mad Scientist Samurai that much, but no one disliked it. Right. And by virtue of everybody saying that they're okay, because there were no swings either way, they ended up being the number 2 seed.
Right.
And those are the numbers, that's the algorithm, but it doesn't really seem right. So that when Vigilante Orcs, who even myself, I've said, I really like this faction, I like the others better, but they were lowballed, they come in like a wrecking ball, and they knock out the number 2 seed.
And then they trample over the rest of the ones that were mediocrely placed.
Right. So we're going to look at we're going to look at some other seeding algorithms. I've already started working on some things to say, like, all right, if we weighted things a certain amount, or if we added in some more seed data based on other people, what would the verdict be? We know that the selection committee is going to be larger next year. Already reached out to a couple of people. One person is definitely on board. So maybe with more votes and getting a little bit more consistency, that will help out with the seeding algorithm.
Excellent. And are we going to post who there's going to be? What are we going to do for next year?
We'll probably do the same thing before the seeding video, but it's a little premature to talk about everything because it's still being worked on.
Yep. So throughout this tournament, we have learned a lot.
Yeah.
We've taken in a lot of y'all's comments, and we've actually looked at improving our systems and the tournament for next year. But before we talk about next year, you want to talk about the Final Four?
Right. Now, because we did the Final Four recap video where we recapped a lot of the tournament up until that point, but now
we're doing the post-game Final Four recap real quick.
Right. Now, I don't know that there's necessarily a lot that we want to say about the Alien Granny Vigilante Orcs. That was pretty much by surprise.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things about Smash Up is how you can't always go by the score. You have to go by the action, because when I was watching that game, I thought that J.Crew wouldn't play the Invader on the final base that was going to score. It turns out that he probably should have, because no matter what, Turing Jedi can't beat him. Because we're calculating, all right, if he gets the 5 points in Angry Pillagers, that'll be 15, but then J.Crew will get 3 more points.
Yeah.
And so he would go from 14 to 17. The point is that if you go by the score, it looks like it's 15 to 9, and that's a blowout. When the truth is, it's one turn away from being much closer.
Yes.
But that was a really enjoyable game to watch. I think it was a lot closer than people realized until the Alien Granny's engine began to fire. You've got the terraforming play, which is 2 points, plus an invader for a 3rd point, and then always remove Grannies. You put the 2 invaders back on top of the deck. The clock is ticking.
Yeah.
It's like, that's what they do in most games.
Yeah, they're consistent.
So let's talk about the Kung Fu Fighting Dinosaurs game with Kaiju Innsmouth. Now, there's a lot that's been said about this game, mostly negative, but there's a couple of things that stand out to me that I want to talk about. And the first is I want to go back to the initial seeding selection and the fact that this was Chucky's Cookie's greatest deviation. What he was talking about, because we ranked them very high and he ranked them not as high. And when he was talking about it, he was talking about how the fact that they are slow, that they have no card draw, that they have cards that will complement each other, but it's not an even mesh where it's like every card fits nicely with each other.
Right.
And so they're susceptible to the cards being drawn in the wrong order. In game 2, which Simon Stern played against Shark Truckers, no one playing Shark Truckers wins that game.
Yeah.
No one. That was literally like, here's the best possible way that the deck could be arranged. Fast as Lightning King Rex. Fast as Lightning King Rex. Dragon Warrior. Power counters to King Rex. Rampage. Like, obliteration. 3 bases. Done.
It was the quickest game of the entire tournament. And I was just there like, I came over to Jim's place just to play that one real quick. And I'm just like, well, that was a quick 15 minutes. I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of my time here.
Yeah, because there's actually a point where I go downstairs to go, bring up the pizza.
Yeah.
I come back and the game is over.
Yeah. And
it's like, what just happened?
What's going on here?
So that's the ceiling of that faction. But what happens if that doesn't happen?
Right.
And I think that was game 4. Now, I've watched that game twice, and as I was watching it, I said, there's no way that they win this game. No way. Based on what was drawn, and based on how Kaiju Innsmouth plays.
And what was out there as bases.
Right. And I think people greatly underestimate the presence of the ninja bases, which is something I want to talk about. At the start of the game, I said, I don't like this, but I don't want to say why. And that's because I'm not going to basically give strategy advice to my opponent when I'm trying to win. But then I realized a couple of things after that. And of course, I'm not going to say that because I don't want to, give away my strategy. But there's a couple of things. A couple of people mentioned about spreading out. That would not have worked for a couple of reasons. Number one, the Kung Fu fighters, other than the Dragon Warrior and Expert Timing, which I'll get to in a second, cannot spread power globally. They can only send it from base to base with ancient Chinese art. It says from one minion here to another minion here. Now, ninja bases, I clamor for them, so I know them. The kaiju have breakpoint damage that reduces the breakpoint without adding power. If he builds up those bases, I could take both of them out in a single turn. It's advantage me. And there's another subtlety. The card I'm always worrying about in that game is expert timing. I actually mentioned it multiple times. Expert timing can transfer power counters from one of their cards to any card. And Dragon Warrior can go minion to minion. What I realized was that power counters mean nothing to actions. Look it up in the rules. It says that power counters have meanings on minions and on titans, but unless the action specifies something, power counters are meaningless. In other words, he can't destroy my actions. If I put actions on the base and he tries to move them off, it's not going to do anything. And so it was very much advantage me, and there's no reason for him to spread out. I think that he had to play fast, and I even said before the game, he's going to play fast, I have to play faster. If he starts slowing down and I'm speeding up, it's going to be advantage me. Now, I had a particular play in mind that I want to talk about because it's crazy, and it's exactly something that I would do. I would have done something amazing if he started to accumulate a lot of powers on the base. And it's nothing. I would have stopped playing cards, and I would have top decked myself, waiting for a moment. What I would have done is waited for both bases to break. That way I've got 2 clean bases, and I've still got a presence on another base. If he can break a base on his turn where I get second place, where again he can't kick me off, what that does is give me an opportunity to get a base by myself. Because if you do the math, what he can drop purely from his hand, if it's a blank board, take the base out of the equation, what he can drop in terms of power versus what I can drop in terms of power, mine is significantly higher. If you go back and watch the game logs for all the games I played, I usually have 1 uncontested base, and that lets me play very conservatively. Normally, I break the base early and play conservatively later. I would have done the opposite. I would have played conservatively to begin, waited for a moment, he breaks a base, so now it's a clean base, and I can drop at least 23 power based on the cards that I'm holding onto in my hand, and then the game would be over like that. And what people would have seen is that I'm just doing nothing, waiting for my moment. With the 2 ninja bases that are in my advantage, it's exactly where I want it to be. I actually did the math at the specific bases where you've got a 5-3-2 and a 4-2-1 base. So if he gets 9 and I get 5, and then I Kaiju Alliance the ninja bases, he gets 4, he goes to 13, I get 6, and I go to 11, and then I go, all I need is a 4-point base by myself, and I've won the game that way. So I don't think spreading out would have won, because I was completely prepared for it. I think he did a great job doing the best he can. He was trying to play fast before I got to my good cards. I just played a little bit faster, and I think people continue to underestimate Kaiju Innsmouth, even in the final game, which we'll get to in a little bit.
And all the cards you were worried about the entire time he didn't have.
Right. There was a couple of comments about using King Rex. I would have loved for him to use King Rex. To take that out of the equation. I would have broken the base right then and there so that it's in his discard pile and I don't have to worry about it for the rest of the game.
Unless you're breaking a base with King Rex, you shouldn't be using it.
Especially not with that deck. When you can, because every power counter means double to him with Rampage. Even just 1, if you have Dragon Warrior, and this is what happened in that game with Cave of Shinies, it's I play the King Rex, I transfer a couple of power counters to him with Dragon Warrior, and I Rampage, and that base goes away instantly. That's why I'm not surprised King Rex wasn't used, and I would have loved it. It would have been to my advantage. I would not have had to stress over that. How much did I stress over expert timing? If you want to use expert timing to win a ninja base, by all means, do that. I talked about that with the terraforming base, where it's like, sure, use terraforming on the first play of the game. I don't have to worry about it anymore.
And Jim's heart rate goes down, his blood pressure eases, you know. Extend some years to his life.
So I get where people are coming from, but from my perspective, I would not do many of the things that they're suggesting, and that's like, I think the only play there, given the presence of the ninja bases and the fact that he has no cascading base play, which is what the Kung Fu dinosaurs want, it's got to be a race at that point, and it's going to favor the one who has card draw. We both have good cards, but I'm drawing extra cards. It makes sense that I'm going to get to mine first.
So we all play test together, and we all know how Jim plays, and so
Right.
we have probably a really good understanding of your play style, and so we know what we cannot put down because we know what your capabilities are at dropping power,
Right.
regardless of what titan or what faction you're playing.
Right. And I also want to stress that the playtesting numbers are very comparable because we keep all those stats and we report those out. Everybody's within like a point of each other. I don't even have the highest record for the most previous. That actually belongs to J. Crew, which we'll get to in a second. So he has more average points than I do in the last set. But I also want to talk about power creep because I'm always talking about that. And is that a factor in this game? Well, yes, I think it's a factor in this game, but it's a little bit more subtle than that. When you have someone with above average power like the Kung Fu Fighting Dinosaurs, you are inherently more prone to power creep than you realize. Not only that, the Innsmouth, being the weaklings of the group, excel at undercutting power creep. So I'm adding as small as possible. He's adding above average power. It makes sense that you have to play somewhere, and I'd like to tell a story about that. This is actually about 10 years ago. And I'm throwing a capture the flag party. I was remembering this today. We had done it in September, and I spent all night filling up these water balloons, and then it ended up being about 60 degrees and damp. And everyone's saying, okay, we're not going to do these water balloons. I've got about 24 people for capture the flag. It's epic. And this cooler full of water balloons, and no one wants to use them because they don't want to get wet and cold. It's like, all right, we'll just play tag. And the rules for tag-based capture the flag, from what I understand, are you can only be tagged if you're across the line.
In enemy territory.
Yeah, in enemy territory. So everybody lines up, we're spread out. It's like, ready, set, go. And no one moves. No one moves. Why? Because if they move to enemy territory, they can be tagged.
Right.
So everyone is waiting for everybody else to make the first move, and no one's doing anything.
So the ultimate game theory.
Yeah.
Nobody does anything.
Nobody
because
does anything.
The first person who moves loses.
Right. And you have to play cards eventually. Like, if each person gets to a point where they're within range of the other person doing something, the game will lock up. To combat that, you have to take a chance and go for it and hope that the other person yet hasn't drawn the cards that they need in order to facilitate that.
Right.
The longer you wait, the more you actually give someone that opportunity. It's like a shinobi play with the ninjas. Sometimes you just have to hope that they don't have it. If they have it, they have it. But if they give them more turns, they're probably going to draw it. And if you let them break the base on their turn, they're going to win anyway. So you got to take a chance. So after about 3 minutes of nothingness in Capture the Flag, I just ran. And I just sprinted to the end zone. I'm really fast, or really was fast back then. And of course, they had like a wave of people coming after me.
As you're trying to steal the flag as a bandit?
Yeah. And so that, like, I've got a ton of people coming after me, and therefore there's now a hole and other people are sprinting for it. But the point is that someone needs to make the first move. And while power creep is important to consider, if you can't let it paralyze you, you have to start making plays. How many people expected me to break Ryla going from like 4 power, 4 and 2, and I'm looking at it and saying to myself, do I want to kill the minion? And it's like, no. I can grab the base right there.
Yep.
Unexpectedly. So I get where people are coming from, but you have to play the game. And by that point, I knew that the game's mine. There's literally nothing I can do to lose this game other than intentionally losing it. Because all I have to do is play for second place. And so it's probably not the game that people are expecting. Very much influenced by the 2 ninja bases being on the side. But I think the play makes sense.
It does.
So let's talk about the final game.
All right. Yeah. Whew, a lot of contentions about that one.
So I've talked to J. Crew about this because there are a couple of people who are talking about some plays that they would do differently, and I'm thinking about it. No, I've watched this game 1.5 times because I've only looked at the parts that I watched the whole game and then zeroed in on the parts that people were saying about, and there are 3 main plays to discuss: the invader play, leaving it protected; the matriarch play, not using the talent; and then the terraforming play that people are talking about. Now, I want to point out, for people who are saying that player skill is a thing, I have a losing record against J. Crew in the tournament. Yeah, and to get Grannies to the finals, he had to beat me twice with them and Turing Jedi, and he's not going to like either of those matchups in terms of players, regardless of what faction. So I actually really like the fact that we got one person steering them to the finals and the other person. I thought that was a lot of fun.
I find that very interesting, actually.
Yeah. So the invader play. Now, a lot of people are saying, why would you leave that unprotected? He's going to play tail smash. Well, when I asked him about it, it turns out that was the point. He wanted tail smash out of the game.
Because he was planning on doing Innsmouth to bring it back in.
What?
Well, he was planning on using Innsmouth, right? The base, because he was going to terraform.
Well, no, we haven't gotten there yet.
Okay.
Itty City is out, and Itty City can shuffle minions back into the deck.
Right.
So just as I'm talking about how I want King Rex out of the game, he wanted Tail Smash out of the game. It turns out that was the plan all along. Now, you can say whether or not that is the right or wrong play. Would I have done that? My first instinct was no, I would not have done that. But then I thought about it more, and I realized that it's not that clear, because I'm always talking about baiting people into playing their best cards. And I got baited into playing a card. It took the card out of the equation. He no longer needs to worry about it.
So if he wanted to do like he did last game, where he did always room at Granny's and bring up his cards, he could play his invaders confidently, knowing that they were safe.
Yes. So I talk about baiting terraforming. I talk about baiting the geeks. And so turns out I got a taste of my own medicine a little bit. Now it's an aggressive play, and aggressive plays are always hard. You know, I watch a lot of baseball, and people talk about someone going for a gutsy stolen base. If he makes it, the person is hailed as a hero. If he gets caught, everyone's like,
idiot.
why are you stealing a base there? Like, it's the correctness of the play is always based on the outcome of it. And so what would I have done in that situation? I honestly don't know. But the reasoning is sound. He wanted me to play Tail Smash. One, he doesn't know if I have it. And two, he wants to get it out of the game, and now it's out of the game. So you could say that was probably, could have been a factor, but given the amount of times that he can actually, you have to leave the invader out at some point, because there's two beam ups, there's abduction, and then there's crop circles. Now, I think there was one beam up that was seen, abduction was seen later, and crop circles was never seen.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to spam points early, which is what they do, like spam points early and often, it makes sense that you would take a chance and not see if I have Tail Smash. The other thing is that the Grannies have chicken soup. So if the invader gets destroyed, he can go back on top anyway. So you can return it with Itty City, and you can eventually get it back from the discard pile. Having points early on is an advantage. You run the risk if you're waiting to play it, even if he pulls it back up and holds it in his hand. If he's not playing it, he's not going to get points anyway. You got to get points. You got to make me fearful that he's still in the game. And
then you have to play aggressively instead of conservatively in order to break bases first and get your lead back.
Right. So there's some pretty sound reasoning. Again, I'm not saying what I would have done in that situation, but that is a page out of my playbook. And so if I'm saying you got to bait people into using the best cards, well then baiting me, that's what I say and I stand by that. That makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about the matriarch play. Now I know that you have some opinions on that.
Well, I mean, I think that was, we actually commented that during the tournament. We were like, you want to use matriarch? And he was like, well, no. And then you responded with like, no, please
do. Yes, I absolutely want to use matriarch there, because I was thinking about what it would look like for the King of the Hill video. If you don't know what you're getting, that's a really tough play. So there was a moment earlier in the tournament where Jake was playing Cyborg 8 Princesses against me, Zombie Vampires, a game I lose 18-17. Now, that game was a lot closer than it should have been. Now, I've talked about Overrun being, and I'm very much anti-vampires, and I've said that, and I intentionally gave myself Zombie Vampires, because I wanted to make sure that
they had the greatest opportunity, chance to make it, and they still didn't.
Still lost. But that game was way closer than it should have been, and it's because of Marie de Gros of the Princesses revealing the top card of the deck and putting it on the bottom, and it was juiced up. The best action, like if he gets juiced up, game over, I'm obliterated based on when that happens. He was like oh, come on, you know, like.
Yeah. So he learned early on the dangers of the matriarch.
Yeah. So I mean, if can you imagine if zombie? Well, actually no, because people really liked zombie vampires. They were really like they had over 60%
success. Really?
Yeah, for the voting. So people would have actually liked it, but if they had gone on, I would have been like everything would have been different, because then they would have faced alien grannies instead of cyborg princesses, which they probably would have gotten obliterated.
Yeah.
But the point is that, you know, there's a lot of risk with those cards, and it's already backfired a couple of times and nearly cost cyborg princesses a round 1 loss. So when we're saying like, please use matriarch, like absolutely do it. Like it makes perfect sense why you wouldn't do it. You don't know what's on there, and people, including myself, were not expecting matriarch to be gone as quickly because I was not intending on breaking Itty City. I had my eyes set on the robot base, Factory 436, 1337, and I was actually 1 point from a guaranteed breaking of it, and I was a chance away from breaking it for 7 points.
Oof.
But I chose 7 uncontested points.
Yeah.
Which at that point would have put me up 12-4. And if I lose that game, I deserve to lose. But it was a chance, and I didn't want to add more power and risk terraforming because that was the game plan beforehand. So I pivoted to Itty City to break that because I recognized how much that engine would hurt me in the long run. And I think it's because of that that the terraforming play actually makes a lot of sense. Now, what I would encourage people to do, and I've already encouraged a couple of people to do this, is to go back and watch our respective reactions to when terraforming is played. You said it's going to be a ninja base.
Yes.
And my response is nope, and it's not a good one from me. There were 4 bases I thought it might actually be from terraforming. The 2 ninja bases, Jungle Oasis, and Innsmouth. I actually thought that Innsmouth was going to come out, and I'll talk about them one at a time. So the ninja bases would not have made sense. There was 5 power on the base. So I would just stop playing.
Right. Just gone elsewhere. And
right. So it's terraforming just basically acts like all right, I'm going to shred your Titan in a couple of actions, but it's not going to result in any change of points.
Yeah.
So that's the wrong play. It's way too early. The entire game, if you remember my game notes, I'm watching out for terraforming, especially from the loss of the Titans. I'm not putting a lot of minions on there so that I can be terraformed into a ninja base. I'm focusing on actions. If he's going to terraform me, I'm going to lose the actions. So it wasn't going to be the 2 ninja bases. It could have been Jungle Oasis, but then he would need the minions. He'd need 7 power to overtake me, which is doable with 2 minion plays, but he doesn't have it.
Yeah.
So that's why it's not Jungle Oasis. So why is it Innsmouth? And why am I afraid that it's going to be Innsmouth? Because he can get back his invaders and his matriarch. The plan makes a lot of sense, and it's why I'm afraid, because they got this far on the strength of farming those invaders.
Yep.
And if the invaders are not in the game, then I'm going to win. The best way to get them back is to manipulate the bottom of the deck, and he has the card to manipulate the card in the bottom of the deck. So in the single turn, he gets back the invader and the matriarch, and if he gets the matriarch back, he gets both invaders back, and now it's like, I've used Tail Smash, he's got both of his invaders, he's got all of his beam ups, it's not looking good for me at all. So the plan makes a lot of sense. Now, after the fact, I realize, wait a second, I can use this to my advantage.
Yep, and you top decked one of his
bottom deck.
Sorry, bottom deck, because for the grannies, that's basically the same thing because they can pull from the bottom.
Right. Yeah. If I hadn't done that, and I'm curious to know if anyone would have thought to do that. If I hadn't done that, that game plays out completely differently. I want to say that the breakpoint is 23, and I've got 5 power. There's an eternity on that base because I've lost a lot of my actions. He has plenty of time to reap those rewards, and he's not going to do a ninja base, so it's either a 4-2-1 or a 5-3-2 split. But what mattered there, the problem was there were no invaders. We need a way of getting back the invaders, and so when you view it from that perspective, again, it's an aggressive, risky play that would have worked, except for the fact that I can do the same thing to him.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't realize that until like right before my turn. Like there is a series of, you can't see my face, there is dread all over my face. Not only did I expect it, but I was afraid of it. So if I'm afraid of it, it means that there is some sound logic behind the play. A lot of people are saying, you know, you jam signal that base. No, that is not, because
He
that
wants the ability.
What?
He wants the ability.
No, he's to jam signal the robot base.
Oh, yeah. Gotcha.
Because I can destroy an action, and I haven't seen that card yet. And at that point, you know, I finished the game with 7 cards left in my deck, one of which is Wade Through the Buildings. But I could leave that base out and just, it's like, okay, that base is off limits. I haven't really used many of my Kaiju conflicts. I can destroy the action on the same turn and break that base and get even more points. If he had jam signaled that, I would have slowed down, waited for my opportunity, and then gone nuts on that base. Because he has no reason to play there anymore either. And then maybe I get 7 or 9 points by myself.
Only way he could have used that base to his advantage using jam signal is if he could break it on his base on his turn and play jam signal. Only if he was losing.
Right.
And so that you both get 2 points and then you're still flush.
Right. Or he plays it and then he destroys it. Because he can destroy actions.
Yeah.
So he destroys his own action. But that's an incredibly slow play. So for people who say that the Innsmouth play doesn't make a lot of sense, I was afraid of it and only figured out at the last second a way to counter it.
You realized half of it during the tournament because you were only thinking it was minions, right?
Right, yeah.
And then you're like, oh wait, we can do actions. And then you're like, it doesn't say which player. It doesn't say who.
No, I knew which player.
Oh, you knew you could
absolutely knew which player.
And then you had that twinkle in your eye where you're like, I'm going to bottom deck a different card.
Right, but I probably still would have done the minion just to make sure that I didn't give him anything useful. Because an action can always backfire.
Yeah.
I gave him the Grandma because, like, if you put something on the bottom of the deck, it buries it further.
Yep.
So everybody has a different play style. Again, I don't think people ever really believed in Kaiju Innsmouth. I don't know why. It's like, what does this combo have to do to prove themselves?
Yeah.
If you look at that game, when I was watching it today, it's like, look at the sheer number of Innsmouth cards that I played. It's not like the Kaiju are doing all the heavy lifting and I sprinkle in a couple of Innsmouth cards and call it a day. No. It's like, they can definitely spam cards. They can draw cards. They can spam extra plays. One of the things about Kaiju Innsmouth is that they're never starved for minions, which is really important. And it was ironic to me, now that I saw his cards, to see how much he was starved for minions the entire game. And that makes a big difference. I want to talk about Kaiju Innsmouth versus Kaiju Minions of Cthulhu. Because I've said that both are very good combinations for Kaiju.
Yeah.
And I played both of them. Kaiju Minions of Cthulhu, they only have 2 less minions, but you feel minion starved because you have less chance of seeing them. Like those, it's not just that they have 2 more for Innsmouth, but because they can draw them, you never feel like you are starved for a play. And I think the key of this deck is that I'm playing a minion in an action pretty much every turn, and that's not true of most factions.
Yeah.
So please believe in Kaiju Innsmouth. I don't know what else. Like, do I have to go to Gen Con and just like issue a challenge like...
We should have shirts made, believe, and just have Kaiju Innsmouth on there.
Right. It's like, do I have to issue a challenge to everybody? Like, I will play Kaiju Innsmouth against anybody. Just no, I'm not going to do that, obviously. But when you have when I talked about the alien grannies getting this far, I talked about being surprised by how much card draw they actually had, and then they didn't have it. You know, I like to give them a hard time about this, but Turing Jedi actually ranked Alien Grannies number 32. They were his lowest pick. And when I talk about that with him, one of the things he mentioned was that they put a lot of weight into very few cards. What happens if they don't see those cards? And now we have the answer.
Yeah, you lose a tournament and disappoint a lot of people.
Right. So it's like, in a game, Smashness is a game of ceilings and floors. They have an incredibly high ceiling, but the low floor is still there, and anything can happen on a given day. I think you saw the low floor of the Kung Fu Fighting Dinosaurs. I think you saw the low floor of the Alien Grannies, and it just happened at the worst possible time. They are not going to be winning on bases. A common alien granny strategy is actually to try and win on the first base to get cushion, and then invader after that. And J. Crew did that a lot on, when he was bringing them up to the finals. But that didn't happen because of minion starvation. And so when you don't have those few key cards and you can't really compete on bases, what do you expect to happen?
Yeah.
So that's why it's so interesting to me just how different factions play differently. I thought that using the kaiju as an engine would have hurt them because they could destroy my actions, they can terraform, and they can do all these things to me. But if I play really fast, like really fast and aggressive, and he can't keep up, that's what gave them the game, in my opinion.
Yeah. So if you were not happy with how that game was played out or resolved, we actually have an encore game of that. Immediately afterwards, like just before I cut, or right after I cut it for the final video that y'all all watched, you could hear J. Crew go, "All right, set this back up. We're playing this again," and I'm like, "I'm going to record this. We need an encore just to satisfy everybody's curiosity." Yeah.
So I was in shock. Like I felt like I had it. And should probably talk about one other aspect, although it's a larger discussion, just because I saw this comment a lot, so I wanted to address it. And it's Gorgonzola getting the power counter when he comes into play with Oh No or Tiny Priestesses. I know a lot of people were surprised by that, even though it's in the rules and saying that it shouldn't be that way. I agree. This is not my final say on the topic. I agree that there are not ambiguities. What's the word I'm looking for? Inconsistencies.
Yep.
On how some timing resolutions are. But I think that that's actually the one that's correct, and everything else is wrong. It makes sense to me that you would play a card that would resolve and bring Gorgonzola into play, and Gorgonzola would fully resolve before the other card resolves, and that's why it would get the power counter. That makes perfect sense to me. The idea of getting moved off the Leprechaun base and surviving the destruction, that's the part that makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
Because if it says that you have to still be on the same base for Leprechaun and Flame Trap, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I did play a minion on the base. It doesn't say it still has to be there. The clarification says it still has to be there. That to me is the stretch, and I think that's the part that is. I'm curious to see if this actually ends up being a rule change or not, but that's the rule that's in the book. That's the one that I play by, and I think makes sense, and I'll argue profusely, regardless of how it influenced anything. And that's why I'm saying to myself, like, please have more than enough power, please, because if they fight me on the Johnny thing, then there's going to be an asterisk on that game. So it's like, okay, it's great that power counter does not matter, and I stressed several times, like, this power counter does not matter.
Yeah, you still won regardless.
Yeah, that was important to me. So that was my thoughts on the final.
Okay, so that's the final. Next year is Kaiju Innsmouth coming back.
Yes.
All right, so that was what we agreed on. We were going to say the defending champion is going to be coming back next year, and we were really worried that, like, Alien Granny's going to come back next year. Like, we were actually terrified. We're like, Alien Granny is going to be like the dominating faction for the entire March Smashness, series. But it turns out that's not the case.
Right.
It's going to be Kaiju Innsmouth, and we'll see if they can defend their title, and they're going to have their Titan next year.
Yes. So one of the things that we decided to do differently, we wanted a certain power level for all of the teams. We decided to send that power level into overdrive and create as many ridiculous combos as possible. Now that means that we can use the Titan because it's hard to make the Titan and not have the same power level. So the idea is that anyone who has the Titan will use it and that'll be their bump, and everyone else will have like an amazing synergy. Like Superhero Princesses is the one I'm telling people about. Superhero Princesses is in that. That's one of my favorite classic combinations. But I can't say what we already know what all the teams are, but I can't tell you what they are because 5 of them are factions that haven't been released yet, and that would be telling you what the factions do. They're all ridiculous. I loved 30 of the 32. I've said that I did not like Miskatonic Star Roamers. I was so impressed by how Turing Jedi played them that I was like, wow, they can really be... He played them better than I played them when I've played that faction. Still not sold on zombie vampires, but that is it is what it is.
But we'll see how they are with their Titan.
Right, but the vampires are they're getting a new partner.
They're getting a new partner? All right, got it.
So now I'm going to say something that's absolutely crazy, and it's in direct response to a lot of the comments that I've seen.
Okay.
I think that Kaiju Innsmouth with the Innsmouth Titan is the rare opportunity where that combo will get worse. And let me explain that. The Dagon is fantastic, but the problem is that you run out of locals so quickly because you're playing them all. Kaiju Innsmouth cannot necessarily support being bled of minions, because then it's all about the actions, and if you can counter the actions, they're done. Also, the sheer amount, that combo wins based on card draw, and while the locals will draw more cards, they'll draw more locals instead of drawing more cards in general. And I think taking because you can only have one Titan in play, taking Gorgonzola out of the equation will really hurt that deck. So I'm worried that, I don't know who's going to play them, it may not even be me, but I'm worried that the temptation to use Dagon might actually hurt them, because then Dagon will be stuck
being out there,
and therefore you can't use Gorgonzola, and you'll end up wasting a number of your good cards. Now, of course, you can just not use Dagon, and then you'd have the exact same thing, but I'm worried that if you use him and you use him improperly, the combination will actually get worse. So if I had used Dagon all throughout the tournament, I'm not convinced that the results would be any better. But we had agreed that the defending champion would be in, and that they would get their Titan. So Kaiju Innsmouth with their Titan is in there.
So double-headed dragon right there.
Yes. Gonna have to use the Titan carefully. We also want to talk about the format. Now, at this point, it was supposed to be a secret, I guess, but people already know that there's going to be 5 factions in the next expansion, which with the Penguins will bring it up to 74, which is 37 teams. Now, I can only think symmetrically, and so I like the powers of 2, and 37 is a bit much. But we've also been talking about something throughout the tournament, and one, we don't have the time to do 37. That's going to be a lot of extra play-ins and whatnot. 32 is just a much cleaner number. And someone needs to go, and the entire playtesting team agreed that the Geeks are the logical candidate.
So they're being ban listed.
Yes. Now, I know that there are quite a few people who are going to be upset by that. I know that there is a lot of people who are like, yes, get rid of them. One of the problems is, me too. I'm still in shock over that round 3 game where I came back from a double base breaking. The problem with the Geeks is that one of the things we like to do is we let people mulligan their plays that don't result in any change of information.
Right, so change of information means you reveal your deck, or you find out information that you normally wouldn't know.
Right.
And so when you play against a faction like the Geeks, which is reactionary, you play a card and you have to ask them, are you going to do anything? Do you have to react to anything?
Yeah.
And as soon as you do that, you then learn new information.
Yeah, and it completely slows the game down. I think that it introduces a lot of timing problems. I also don't think it's fun to play against them. I don't even necessarily like playing them. So, like, it might be something from I'm going to play a minion over here. No, actually, I'm going to play it over here.
Yeah.
Well, now the Geek player has a lot more information, and therefore might choose to do control minion. It's also really hard because you have to wait for control minion. And the rules are really ambiguous as to when the timing actually occurs. Like, be prepared to undo some stuff. And can you imagine, like, Will Wheatoning a terraforming? Like, you've already shuffled the base deck. Like, it's...
And if you are playing with the Explorers, that matters.
Yeah.
Because suddenly you destroyed their cards that they played earlier's abilities.
So someone has to go, and it makes sense that they would be one of them, because they mess up the timing a lot. They're not really fun to play against. I originally had paired them with zombies because that's an absolutely ridiculous, in my opinion, that's a top 5 2-player game, and that's just brutal. So regardless of what we do, the Geeks are out. Now we need to cull some other people too, and the All-Stars are also a logical candidate. Now, Turing Jedi pointed out that if we cull the All-Stars, we're not actually culling any cards.
Right, because every single card that's an All-Stars is somewhere else in the tournament.
Yeah. So, and it's clean. You know, you just basically say, all right, those bases and those factions are out. Like you're creating instead of, because the sets are kind of balanced together. Instead of taking out, you know, like a quarter of this one, a quarter of this one, it makes sense to just rip the entire one out and say bigger, geekier boxes out. So that brings it down to 36 teams. Now you could do a 36 team where the top 8, the bottom 8 play each other in, but that's more than we want to do. And there was also another logical candidate, and that is to cut Munchkin. Now I'm going to explain this. This is not a hatred of Munchkin. It's actually J. Crew's favorite expansion. We have other plans for Munchkin that we'll talk about. We're actually going to be doing Munchkin-only events.
Yes.
One of the things that happened was that the Munchkin decks introduced treasures, and treasures ended up becoming a wild card that I think nobody expected. The sheer number of games determined by Potion of Halitosis, which is completely random based on who it's given to. Kung Fu Fighting Dinosaurs actually may have been eliminated if they had not gotten Potion of Halitosis.
Yeah.
And they made it to the Final Four. And that's what Munchkin does, is it gives these variable player powers given out in a completely random fashion to whomever, and you no longer know exactly what's going to happen. It's like, I draw a treasure card, and I get this really useful card that gives me 1 point, or can kick you off a base. You get a treasure card that lets you take 2 treasure cards when the other treasure cards are revealed and it never gets used. That actually happened.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that because Munchkin adds a little bit of complexity with monsters and treasures, let's isolate that, move them to their own event where we can go nuts. And we'll talk more about Munchkin in a couple of weeks when we actually have ironed out all the details. So if you've got to cut 10 people, it makes sense to cut the entirety of Munchkin, again, doing something else with it, and to cut the geeks because no one likes them except for like their 4 or 5 fans in the world, and to cut the All-Stars because you're not really cutting anything at all. So that's going to be the format. There'll be 32 teams, 32 overpowered teams, but how will people be introduced to those teams?
Right. So we are going to be hosting, really playing a series of preseason, almost expedition games, but all the factions that we'll be playing will be one for the tournament coming up in all their glory.
Yeah.
They'll also be played by the various players that will be in the tournament.
Yes.
We may or may not have one-offs where someone may not be in the tournament as we iron out details and just logistics at the time of the tournament.
Yeah.
It might be like somebody has like a convention they have to go to, or I don't know, deploys or something. I don't know. I can't see the future. I wish I could. But, you know, logistically, we would try to do a game every week, not every week from now until the tournament. That's a little much, but we will try to do before the season starts, before the tournament starts, to have a game every week. But we'll see how that goes.
Right, and it's important that you understand why we're doing this. This is to introduce the teams and also introduce the players a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, if people said like they should have known who was playing, nobody knows the majority of people on the playing testing team. You probably could have figured out that there's a guy who's only playing underdogs who's named Bandit. And given that I'm constantly calling myself Bandit, you could have figured out it's me. I was worried that everybody would bet on me to win every game, which wouldn't have been good because
if they did, I don't think they would have won.
It's not clear, but I didn't win every game.
Exactly. So if they bet on you to win every game and you didn't, suddenly they sabotage their own bracket.
And also, we're not trying to make it be about the people.
Right.
But everybody has different playing styles that lends itself to different decks, and so we want to think of a way to make it a little bit more deterministic. So we're going to experiment with a couple of things. Just get people used to seeing the other players. Plus, it'll just be fun to get more videos out there. People are saying we want more videos. We like doing videos. We don't necessarily have the time to do it.
Right. I mean, if you want to pay me to do this full time, I'll take your money.
I would also like to. I've been trying to get fired from my job for years. This is not a joke. Ask my coworkers what #FireJimPrice means. This is a real thing.
It's a campaign he's running.
Yes.
So One of the other reasons why we're doing this is we hope to really iron out and flush out our production here. And so that would mean that my goal is for March Smashness 2020 is that we have every game recorded. So if you see games that are bad or something wrong, please leave a comment. We're looking at improving ourselves.
That's not a promise that every game will be recorded.
Right.
But
it's a goal. It's I shoot high goals. I don't always make them, but I do shoot for them.
Right. We want to give people the most immersive experience possible. This is our first year. I was really happy with the level of immersion. People are always going to want more, but we still have our jobs and our families.
Yes, we
do. We did the best we could.
All right. Next thing we want to talk about, we talked about for next year, the format, the expedition games, and now player count.
Right. So this is something that we had been talking about internally, even before other people had started to mention it. We've got a solid group of five people. We'd ideally like that number to be higher, but that is not easily done. So we're thinking of ways, and we're basically assessing other candidates. We don't just want to pull people in blindly, because we want to make sure that they can play the game properly, particularly whether it's a rules question or just making sure that we are maintaining the integrity of the tournament. I think 8 is an ideal number, but that just means we have to magically find 3 people.
And we got to improve the logistics of 3 more people.
Yeah, which is
or include the logistics of 3 more people, which
right.
5 people was pretty tough to logistically get together in that short span of time.
And that's at least another pizza. And if you guys think that the pizza just magically appears, no, I make it myself. I make the sauce. I actually had to finish up the final games to go home and make more sauce because I ran out of it during all of the tournament. So like we hear you. We'd love to get it. The format that we had made sense with 5. Whether we can get that number to 6 or 8, we're gonna run some experiments. We're not promising anything yet, but we are different. It's something that we had thought about ourselves.
And I'm trying to remember. This is a long video. If we mentioned that next year we're going to be able to tell you who's playing what factions.
That's what we're thinking right now.
Yeah.
That you get a little bit more insight, and so that way at least people wouldn't be surprised by certain ones. And what we would also do, since we don't know who's going to advance, we'd probably peg people at different levels just to give them a little bit more determinism. It's something that we've talked about and we're investigating.
Yep. So if you have questions or concerns, we are addressing them. Trust us.
Right.
We read every comment, and we may not have commented on them, but we read them all. And we're taking them to heart.
Also, I have already confirmed with the convention that I was at that they will not be on the same weekend, which was a terrible idea. I don't know what I was thinking. It's like, yeah, we'll do everything in advance, and we won't have to support it, and we could go to the. I've got nothing.
Yeah. So the final tournament, the final day, we had the tournament, we had a convention, we had my daughter's birthday. It was just a fully packed day, and it was just a Sunday, and you're supposed to take those easy.
Yeah. It's like, sorry guys, no one was in more pain than me because it's like, I'm gonna die. I'm just March 31st. They're gonna both the convention where like I've got a demo series and a panel talk, and March Smashness they're ending at the exact same time. I'm gonna do it and then I'm done. Like
yeah.
So we know that's a lot, but we just wanted to make sure that people knew that we take their feedback to heart with the tournament. There's some things we want to improve, but we definitely really enjoyed this tournament and we're happy with how it came out, both from the results, the level of engagement and the quantity, and we cannot wait for March Smashness 2020 and for the other things that we've got going on in the channel. I'll let you know that there are at least 3 other major events that are being discussed so that it's not just March Smashness. One of the big takeaways was that people really loved having something to look forward to and seeing Smash Up on the grand stage. So that's why we're trying to do as much big things as possible.
Yep, and I have an idea. I don't think I've even told you yet to help improve for next year, but we really look forward to it. We really appreciate y'all's engagement, and please comment. We do read them. We will appreciate it, and we will absolutely, hopefully, incorporate it into our plan for next year. So once again, from all of us here at Crank It Up and our playtesting team, thank you very much.
Yes, let's shut it down.